They look at her and see a woman alone and they mistake it for weakness. They see her walking without a hand to hold and they assume she's missing something. But they don't understand. Her walk is not her weakness, it's her weapon. She walks with her head held high, not because everything is easy, but because she has learned how to carry the weight of the world and still move with grace. She's not broken. She's battle tested. Every step she takes is a declaration that she refuses to bow to the expectations of a society that says a woman isn't whole unless a man stands beside her. She walks alone but not empty. In the silence of her steps, there is a symphony of strength. She walks past the whispers, the judgments, the labels, all the things people try to attach to her story. And she keeps walking because she knows something deeper. She knows that her walk is not defined by who is or isn't with her. It is defined by the God who goes before her, the purpose that fuels her, and the power she discovered when she was stripped of everything she thought she needed. There was a time when the loneliness hurt, when she cried in the dark and wondered if she was forgotten, when she questioned her worth because others measured her value by the presence of a partner. But in that dark place, something happened. She didn't die there. She found herself. She found a version of herself that doesn't beg for love, that doesn't shrink to be chosen, that doesn't break under pressure. She found the fire that had been buried beneath the noise. The fire that didn't need permission to burn, the fire that gave her courage to keep walking, even when the path was unclear. She walks alone, not because she failed to be loved, but because she refused to settle for less than what she's worth. Her walk isn't about bitterness, it's about boldness. She's not anti-love. She's not anti-relationship. She just refuses to give herself to someone who can't see the treasure she carries. She's learned that peace is better than pretending, and solitude is better than being surrounded by people who make her feel alone. Every scar she carries is a badge of her journey. She's been through heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal. She's had her heart shattered by people who promised to protect it. But instead of staying broken, she let the pain shape her into something stronger. She let it build her, refine her, purify her. So now when she walks, she doesn't walk to impress, she walks to testify. Her walk tells a story of a woman who refused to give up on herself. A woman who stood up when life knocked her down. A woman who believed that her calling was worth the cost. Some people don't understand her silence because they've never had to fight battles without witnesses. They've never had to wipe their own tears and push forward without applause, but she has. And now silence doesn't scare her. She knows how to hear God in the quiet. She knows how to find strength in stillness. She knows how to walk forward even when the world offers no map. Her walk has taught her to trust her steps, to honor her path, to listen to the deep wisdom within her soul. She's not bitter, but she's better. She's not desperate, but she's discerning. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't beg, she blesses. Because she's learned that being alone doesn't make her less. It makes her more aware, more powerful, more intentional. Her presence is not something to pity, it's something to respect. She walks alone, but she carries generations with her. She carries the voice of women who never got the chance to speak. She carries the strength of ancestors who survived worse and still stood tall. She walks with legacy in her steps and vision in her eyes. So when she walks, don't misread her. Don't assume that just because she's alone, she's lonely. Don't assume that just because she walks without a man, she walks without meaning. Her walk is not her weakness, it's her weapon. It's the proof that she has chosen strength over fear, purpose over pressure, and destiny over distraction. Her walk is not for everyone to understand, but for those who see it for what it is. It is sacred. It is holy. It is powerful. Loneliness has a way of making people question their value. It creeps in quietly and often feels like a punishment, like you've been forgotten or left behind, while the rest of the world moves forward with laughter, with love, with companionship. But what most people don't see is that loneliness is not a void, it is a vessel. It is not an absence, it is a classroom. It is not emptiness, it is preparation. When you're in a season of being alone, it's not because life is withholding something from you, it's because life is getting you ready for something you couldn't handle if it came too soon. People often pray for purpose, for impact, for elevation, but they don't realize that purpose has a price, and that elevation demands endurance. That kind of strength doesn't come from comfort. It doesn't come from the crowd. It comes from the quiet places. It comes from being stripped of the distractions and support systems that once propped you up. In loneliness, you come face to face with yourself. You start to hear the thoughts you used to drown out with noise. You confront the wounds you never tended to because you were too busy filling your calendar instead of healing your soul. There is something sacred about walking through a season where no one checks on you, where no one holds your hand, where no one validates your worth. It is in that space where you begin to discover that your value was never supposed to be outsourced to other people in the first place. It is where you realize that everything you thought you needed from the outside was actually already within you, buried beneath layers of insecurity and performance. Loneliness forces you to mine the depths of your own spirit. And in doing so, you unearth treasures you didn't even know you carried. You begin to see yourself differently. You stop measuring your worth by your relationship status or the number of people who include you. You stop seeking attention and start cultivating intention. You stop rushing into spaces that don't respect your presence just because you're afraid of sitting with yourself. You realize that it's better to walk alone in alignment than to be surrounded in confusion. And that realization is what prepares you for the next chapter. Because you built the strength to stand without leaning, to love without losing yourself, to serve without shrinking. What people call isolation is often God's insulation. You're being set apart, not set aside. You're being pulled away not because you're unwanted, but because there are things that can only be developed in you when no one else is around to interrupt the process. In the quiet, your character is formed. In the silence, your sensitivity to purpose is sharpened. In the absence of applause, you learn to obey not because it feels good, but because it's right. You learn to walk in alignment with your calling even when there's no one cheering for you. That kind of obedience can't be taught in crowds. It's forged in the furnace of solitude. Preparation looks like long nights where no one sees your tears. It looks like showing up for yourself when there's no one else to support you. It looks like building a foundation in silence so that when the spotlight comes, you don't crumble. It looks like trusting the process when the promise still feels far away. Loneliness is not punishment, it's positioning. It's how life clears out the clutter to give you clarity. It's how you separate what's true from what's convenient. It's how you learn to hear your own voice again, not the voices of the crowd, not the noise of social media, not the expectations of culture, but your true voice, the one that whispers in the dark when everything else fades away. And when that voice becomes your anchor, when your foundation is built on who you are rather than who stands next to you, then you are ready. Not just for a relationship, not just for the dream, but for the responsibility that comes with elevation, because you've been tested in silence and you didn't quit. You've been refined in isolation and you didn't run. You've been strengthened in solitude and you didn't settle. You've been predestined to be in the suffering, then you didn't run. You've been strengthened in solitude and you didn't settle. Loneliness wasn't empty. It was full of lessons, full of preparation, full of power. And when your time comes, when the doors open and the right people arrive and the opportunities unfold, you walk into it not needing anything to complete you. You'll already be whole. She doesn't sit in corners waiting for someone to notice her. She doesn't craft her life around the hope that someone will come along and fill in the gaps. She's not rehearsing her worth in front of mirrors, trying to make herself more desirable, more acceptable, more lovable. She has learned that her life is not a half-finished puzzle waiting for someone else to provide the missing piece. She understands that her value doesn't come from someone else's presence, but from her own sense of identity. She has faced enough rejection to know that love built on validation is always temporary. So she chose a different path. She chose to build her identity on something solid, something eternal, something no human could ever take away. There was a time when she thought love would fix everything. She used to believe that a relationship would heal her pain, that a partner would quiet the voices of inadequacy in her mind. She used to chase affection like it was medicine and treat loneliness like it was a sickness. But life, in its raw, unfiltered truth, taught her otherwise. It taught her that the ache inside her wasn't for another person, but for her own peace. That the hunger she felt wasn't for a man's love, but for her own approval. It wasn't until she stopped chasing others that she started discovering herself. The deeper she looked inward, the more she realized she was never lacking, only distracted. She was never broken, only buried. And so she stopped waiting. She stopped waiting for someone to choose her, to rescue her, to rewrite her story. She picked up the pen and started writing her own. She began making decisions that honored her value. She stopped tolerating disrespect disguised as love. She stopped shrinking to make insecure people feel big. She stopped apologizing for being too strong, too smart, too sensitive, too much. She realized that people who are intimidated by her wholeness were never meant to walk with her in the first place. Wholeness doesn't need to apologize. It stands. It shines. It speaks truth, even when silence would be easier. She carries herself differently now, not with arrogance, but with assurance, not with superiority, but with sacred confidence. She knows who she is, she knows what she brings, and she knows that anyone who doesn't see it isn't meant to stay. That clarity didn't come overnight. It was born out of heartbreak, out of lonely nights, out of prayers whispered through tears. It came through years of giving too much, loving too fast, compromising too often. It came from seasons where she betrayed herself just to keep someone else comfortable. But she woke up, not with bitterness, but with boldness. Not with anger, but with alignment. She made peace with her past and stopped giving it the power to define her future. Now she walks in rooms with presence. She takes up space without apology. She doesn't try to fit in because she knows she was never made to blend. She was made to break patterns, to set standards, to show others what wholeness looks like in real time. She leads with softness and strength. She can cry and still conquer. She can be gentle and still grounded. Her wholeness doesn't make her hard, it makes her honest. She doesn't pretend to be okay just to keep others comfortable. She speaks truth with love. She holds boundaries with grace. She's not afraid to say no because she knows what her yes is worth. She no longer sees relationships as lifeboats, but as partnerships. She's not looking for someone to rescue her from her life, but someone to respect the life she's already built. She doesn't measure love by gifts or gestures alone, but by peace, by consistency, by safety. She's not impressed by promises anymore, only by patterns. She knows that love without alignment is just emotional entertainment, and she's done being entertained. She's focused on being enriched, being expanded, being elevated. She has become the person she used to look for, the nurturer, the protector, the encourager, the safe place. She found that all along she had what she was searching for in others, buried beneath fear, insecurity, and the need to be needed. And now that she has tapped into that power, she guards it fiercely. She doesn't give it away casually. She understands that her wholeness is sacred and it demands to be met with the same energy. Anyone who wants access to her life now must come not to complete her, but to complement her, not to fix her, but to walk beside her as an equal. Because she doesn't wait to be completed. She is already enough. Already radiant, already whole. They talk about her like she's a cautionary tale. They lower their voices when they speak her name, as if her journey is something to be ashamed of, as if the path she walks disqualifies her from dignity. They call her choices rebellious, her strength too much, her silence suspicious. They assume that because she walks alone, because she doesn't follow the script written for her by tradition, she must be broken, bitter, or lost. But what they fail to understand is that her journey is not shameful, it's sacred. Every step she's taken, every decision she's made, every tear she's cried has been woven into something holy. Not because it's been easy, but because she kept going when everything around her told her to quit. She has been misunderstood, misjudged, and mislabeled. People have made assumptions about her life without ever asking for her story. They've watched her from a distance and decided she must be empty because she walks without the covering of a man, without the validation of a ring, without the protection of a traditional title. But what they don't see is what she carries. They don't see the nights she cried out and found strength in the dark. They don't see the prayers she whispered under her breath just to make it through the day. They don't see the courage it takes to choose purpose over pressure, truth over tradition, wholeness over performance. Her journey looks different, not because she failed, but because she refused to fake it. She wasn't running away from responsibility, she was running toward freedom. She wasn't afraid of commitment, she was unwilling to commit to anything that required her to lose herself. She has been through fire and came out with a deeper understanding of who she is and what she carries. The world told her to settle, to lower her standards, to be grateful for any form of love, even if it came with conditions and compromise. But she said no, not because she thinks she's better, but because she finally knows her worth. That clarity is not something she stumbled into, it's something she fought for. Every no she said was a boundary built from broken places. Every time she walked away, it was a prayer answered in courage. She's not embarrassed by her past. She doesn't flinch when people talk about her mistakes. She's made peace with what didn't work out. She's no longer interested in hiding the parts of her story that made others uncomfortable. She knows now that her past didn't break her, it built her. It refined her. It purified her motives and redefined her values. Her scars are not secrets, they are sacred symbols of survival. And anyone who cannot honor the journey that made her who she is today has no place in the future she's building. She has nothing to prove and no one to impress. She walks in authenticity because she knows freedom lives in truth. People want to celebrate the woman who's arrived, but they don't always honor the woman who had to crawl her way out of disappointment, shame, abandonment, and grief just to stand tall again. They want the polished version of her, the one who smiles and inspires. But she knows the power isn't in who she is now, it's in who she had to become. She became her own home when the world shut its doors. She became her own safe place when others became threats. She became her own voice when no one believed her, and her own strength when everything around her collapsed. Her journey is sacred because it was done in silence, in shadows, without applause or affirmation. It was in that quiet transformation that her purpose was born. There are people who would rather see her dim her light to make them comfortable, people who wish she would fit back into the box they once put her in, but she doesn't belong there anymore. She has outgrown their labels. She has evolved past their expectations. She knows now that sacredness doesn't always look like perfection. Sometimes it looks like persistence. Sometimes it looks like rising again and again after being knocked down. Sometimes it looks like taking the long way around because the shortcut costs too much of your soul. Her journey doesn't need approval. It doesn't need permission. It only needs truth. And in that truth, she walks boldly, not because the path is easy, but because it is hers. She walks with grace, with power, and with the quiet confidence of a woman who knows that what others call shame. And in that truth, she knows she must be in her sacred